I hope everybody enjoyed the breakout sessions. Good morning to you all. And welcome to this panel session to discuss data literacy and its relevance to supporting both the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industries. My name is Charles Southwood. I'm the Regional Vice President for Denodo Technology. We're the world's leading vendor for data virtualization. It's a technology that helps with providing real-time data integration without moving and copying the data. So it brings data insights, governance, and perhaps most of all, business agility to organizations. I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel with me here with experts from the pharmaceutical, healthcare, and CPG industries today. And if I could please maybe just ask each of them to introduce themselves, perhaps starting with Jack, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, hi, I'm Jack Lamka. I'm with MSD. So we in Europe, we called MSD, and we have a colleague of mine here too. We didn't realize that. Hey, so I've been, I'm leading the data science capabilities, but also responsible for data literacy at MSD Germany. And I've been here in the pharma space for 4 years, spent 20 years prior to that in the tech industry.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Sahab, perhaps you could introduce yourself also.
Yeah, so I'm Sahab. I'm Jack's colleague in US. I work in global at Merck, and Merck is MSD in Europe. And I work in human health marketing department as used to be a data scientist. Right now, I'm managing data products. Prior to that, my background is in software engineering and data science. I've been a huge proponent of data literacy in this company and the previous companies. I've created employee resource group right around data literacies, and I'm very passionate about the subject and happy to be here.
Fantastic! It's great to have you here too. Now, I think Elvis is not available. Is that right? So perhaps we could move to Stephen by way of introduction.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen. I'm head of global analytics at UCB, which is a Belgian pharma company, but I lead a team of around 35 people globally in the advanced analytics space, as well as the data literacy space, following the definition that was used.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And Bridget, you probably don't need much of an introduction because you've already presented this morning, but just in case people have just joined the session, perhaps you could also give a quick introduction.
Yes, thank you, Charles. So my name is Brigitte Fuhr. I'm leading the central data science team at Boehringer Ingelheim. We are a global team of around 35, 40 people, focusing mainly on the digital product development in the area of data science, but also facilitate the data science community and the Data Science Academy, which is our data literacy program.
Great, thank you, Bridget. So perhaps I can start with a question which is pretty fundamental to the panel. We hear a lot of discussion about the adoption of data-driven cultures, of data democracy, and behind that, the importance of data literacy. And Jack, if I could start with you, what's your understanding of the meaning of data literacy?
That's a good question, and it's particularly based on Brigitte's presentation and the follow-up questions that the understanding differs really. So for me, data literacy means the ability of everybody in the organization to read, understand, and argue with data. And I'm saying everybody, but I'm actually going to narrow this down on the non-data people, because I expect the data people, the analysts, knowing all this. And yes, they need to get upskilling, potentially learning data scientists, learning new approaches, Python, AWS, whatever. That's the technical part. But that's not what I call data literacy. I call data literacy really the ability of the non-data people to understand and use data for business decisions.
Yes, thank you. Sahab, do you have some viewpoints on that?
Yeah, so I see it two ways. So one is, the basic understanding of looking at data and actually understanding how to interpret it, how to make a decision based off it. Average could mean many things, right? We all know that there could be skewness and all that. But I think the challenge comes in when we have a lot of data scientists, data analysts creating these reports, creating this information for the consumption. Many of them are unable to communicate in the business language, or may not know what's important. As a person who is subject matter in that area would subject matter expert in that area would know. So like, I think the beauty comes in when you have like, really great data scientists, data analysts creating information, creating knowledge for them to consume, and they're able to digest at some level. So it's like we're meeting them halfway, and it's very important.
Absolutely, yes. And I think also, particularly in the last 2 years, to Jack's point about it's the data scientists understand and they're bought into the value of literacy. But with COVID over the last couple of years, I think it's fair to say that the entire population has become a lot more literate and wanting to understand the morass of data and statistics that's been thrown up through the media and so on. Stephen, from your perspective, how would you see the definition, if you like, of data literacy?
I see it extremely close to what Jack said. I just would have turned it around. I would have said it's business decision making through the use of data. So to put the business decisions first, and the rest is the skill to what the goal is, and just in the phrasing. But I think it's very close to what Jack said. Similar, like I would always tell the people in my team, we are not running analytics questions or projects or build a segmentation or machine learning project, but you solve a business problem using analytics.
Yes, and I think in the data world, certainly we have the pleasure of being able to meet many hundreds of different organizations. The approach to data in the IT department is sometimes quite different to the perspective that's experienced in the business. And it's, sometimes it can be a bit of a chicken and egg question, can't it, as to what insights do you want? Well, what insights can you give me? That type of thing. Bridget, you've already talked a little bit earlier about some of these sorts of challenges. Perhaps I could move on to the question as to why literacy is important in data and what you feel is needed across the business for that to be effective.
So the understanding is needed in order to get to right prioritization, because if you see data as a side effect, side topic that you would do on top of everything else, also in the business unit, if there's no clear prioritization to put focus on generating the insights, using the insights, then you cannot successfully implement applications. So for example, when we are working on a data science project where we create an application, we usually have product owners from the business unit who are working with a very cross-functional team. We have data experts, we have IT experts, and subject matter business experts working together closely in a team. And there, apart from the understanding, there needs to be really also the right time, the prioritization happening in the business unit, the right resources, so that this is possible. And that's where you realize if data literacy is working. And then the second point is once you have successfully implemented an application and that there's an understanding, there's also a need to trigger change, to accept results that are coming out there, even if they're contradictory to the gut feeling, to what you have done before. And this is then where the understanding is needed. Okay, this is a method. But it's not a black box. Yeah, or it cannot be a black box in order to get the acceptance from users. And all of this bases really on the understanding, how is it working and why is it important for us.
Do you see, Bridget, resistance in parts of the business sometimes to the adoption of that level of understanding and data, or are you pushing against an open door, do you think?
So I think there's not so much resistance in wanting to understand. It's I think naturally our colleagues are very curious and eager to join the trainings. But I do see sometimes really a resistance in the acceptance, really, for people who don't understand the topic well enough, that we really have these challenges in accepting the output of an analysis of an application. Yeah, that is.
So
Yeah.
I'll add to that. And coming from, I've worked in non-pharma industry before, coming to pharma, and I can tell you the contrast there. In previous roles, the product management team or the marketing team were very data savvy in terms of they were continuously looking at data and refining and changing, and the life cycle of making decisions, looking at getting data, making decision, putting something in the production or putting out in the world was very fast. In pharma, things are a bit slow and takes time to make the decision and implement it, right? It's a different kind of setup. And so that and there's a lot of ways of doing things, and there's a lot of changes are happening in pharma industry. So I am very empathetic towards my colleagues there's a little bit of resistance there, but it's probably because there's just so much going on. It's one another thing on their plate to be a data literate, while they have to learn new ways of marketing in this post-COVID world and how the whole ecosystem is changing around the healthcare. So but there is definitely a resistance, and it's very contrast to other industries.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think, pharmaceutical and healthcare are both very data intensive worlds. So the opportunity is enormous, but as you say, you've got to have the business has to trust what's coming through. And there's an element of blind faith, but also you've got, particularly when in data science areas, you've got people who really want to understand the provenance of the data and how it's been aggregated and so on. Jack, if you're putting a team together and you're encouraging a greater level of data literacy, how have you found the most effective ways of going about that? And it's often, a combination, I guess, of people, process, and technology, as always.
So again, I define data literacy as the ability to read and engage with data, and this is I've launched 2 years ago a data literacy program addressed to marketing sales. While I still manage data science and data analysts and hiring data engineers, but in every of those hires, I have some questions about, like, explain decision trees to your grandma. So I'm looking for the ability of somebody with technical background to simplify the language or translate the analytics outcome into business language. Because I believe this is based on what I've seen. I've been in pharma for years, 20 years in tech. So what I see is the biggest inhibitor to become data-driven for any company, but especially in pharma, is this ability to understand and use data. So I ask my data experts that they are able to simplify that, and basically during discussions also kind of educate the non-data people what's possible to do with data.
Yes, it's getting that business IT alignment right, isn't it? The elevator pitch, so they can understand the value.
But not even. Yes, I'm not part of IT. I'm part of the business organization that is responsible for translating data into insights. So IT is even far from my experience, even farther away.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you. And Stephen, your perspective perhaps on encouraging the literacy in the various projects in which you're involved.
In our case, as we start from the business problem side, it's fairly easy to explain people making better decisions sounds like a quite good idea. So if I can teach you how to do better decisions, a lot of people buy in quite well. And we have seen that also in that company. We had initially a program called data literacy. We had a certain group of people applying, and then we had the same program and called it better decision making. And we had a whole different group applying. In the end, it was the same program, but the interest came just from a different angle. But in the end, it was how to use afterwards data to do fact-based decision making. And the teams were very much engaged. At least especially on the management side, how do I take better decisions in the case of COVID? Or how do I take faster decisions now during the Ukraine crisis? Or how can I what does Ukraine lead to our sustainability goals of 2030, depending on the inflation and the oil crisis? So, and how then that can lead to analytical modeling and how they can answer complex questions that today they couldn't, has engaged a lot of people to join these courses for us and really drive it and push it from their side as a need.
It's very interesting what you say, Stephen, about you know, the way you positioned it and the fact that you had completely different audiences approaching you depending on how you do that position. I'm interested to know, Stephen, a little bit more about the sort of obstacles and challenges you've seen when you've promoted these types of programs and how you've perhaps dealt with those.
Well, the first one was the one that when we had it called Data Literacy and Data Academy, we really had more technical people joining that came out of an interest, not the decision makers. And then we still had the gap between the two. It's a bit like in the past, you called data science largely statistics. There's a larger overlap and you have a whole different group who gets interested, or machine learning versus regression. You get people very interested. So a lot came with us for phrasing to rename. And the other part is how to prove the applicability to each individual. Like, how do we tell the head of HR how going through the data literacy training or better decision, how it's going to change tomorrow his work, how he's going to change his attrition problem with an analytical model by thinking about what is the right business question and how to use data to make better decisions, or how to make the right sustainability questions, how the right sales answers, to really adapt as fast as possible to external circumstances.
Yes,
but that was the key challenge, to really make it practical for each individual, what it means for an FP&A in finance, down to a clinical researcher, up to management.
Absolutely, yes. Bridget, in terms of the work that you're doing, what sort of obstacles and challenges do you typically see when you're moving down towards the increased literacy for the business?
So not so much. It's actually the first challenge that we've had when we created the Data Science Academy is that we had way too much interest. So if you can call that a problem, right? So that's
problem, isn't it?
No, but seriously, so it's really focusing on having the right people in the right trainings, right? So there's like Stephen said, there's a high interest if you offer a data science academy, because everyone knows this topic is important. People want to learn, they want to grow about it. Yeah, but it's also that you have to think about how much will people take out of a training if they don't immediately apply it, and how do you get the right target group into the right training formats. Yeah, and this is something where we right now we started a couple of months ago. It's we are still working on this concept of saying, okay, how do we avoid that we have a long waiting list, that people have to wait very long until they can participate in the training, but at the same time that we maintain the quality, because if you only, for example, offer videos or self-learnings, that's not the same experience as having really people in a very interactive session where they can immediately also apply the knowledge. And this is something that we will still work on to refine that step by step.
Yeah. And that brings us onto an interesting topic, which is actually, when you get results, how do you measure the success? How do you know when a project is delivering? Jack, I don't know if you have a perspective on how you've gone about measuring the return on investment and the benefits of these types of projects. It's a tricky one.
Return on investment is always a good question. So what we start measuring this basically in ideally 3 different phases. So first, how something is being used. Second, what impact it has on our end customers. And third, what impact it has on our revenues. With a data literacy program or data evangelism, which we call it now. So far, we have measured basically how the different offerings we provide are being used by our business partners. So again, MST Germany, I'm part of, it's basically marketing sales. So all this is directed to marketing sales colleagues. And it's, we measure how LinkedIn Learning course, which we kind of customize with our own content, is being used. We measure how open data hours are being frequented, or we measure how much engagement we have on our internal social media posts. So that's the kind of an engagement usage. So that's what we were able to measure so far. We are now developing a data literacy index that will consist of several components, including the usage of the tools. But for example, we want to convince our sales colleagues to use email system out of a CRM instead of using Outlook, because they've used the CRM system, we get opens, clicks, day, time, etc. When they send Outlook, best case, we know when this email was sent.
Yeah.
So as part of our index, we will adding component of the percentage of Outlook emails sent, which actually ideally should go to 0, and adding also a gamification component where we want to enable different business units to compete. So creating this index for several business units and tracking this over time to basically give some ideas and give some competition a little bit to foster this move towards more data-driven decision-making. But to close on this, still the biggest challenge is to measure ROI. We don't have the answer for that.
No, I do like the idea of a metric, though, that is as you call it, an index, because you know, it helps to encourage people to judge themselves and the literacy against others. It's very appropriate. Now, I think we are coming towards the end of the session. We've got 4 minutes left, so perhaps we could round off by just asking you, given the audience, if you have one piece of advice you'd like to put forward, what might that be? And Sahib, if I could ask you, perhaps first of all, for your views.
Yeah, so I would say if you're starting a program for data literacy in your enterprise, don't call it data literacy, call it data evangelism. Change it. And I think as we jump into solutioning and try to figure out how to solve this problem, and actually talking about why is this problem needed to be solved and what's the benefit of solving it. If you look at the root cause, most people, at least in US that I've noticed, are scared of math. They have been traumatized by math in their high school. If they're not, data scientists or data analysts, they have, they're scared and they think it's very complex. And if you take the math part out and talk in context of business and talk in terms of how they could use it and make them feel comfortable to come and join these communities, create communities around these topics, and make it organic, it really works. But I think a lot of it is, make them a part of this movement.
Good advice, thank you. And Stephen, in just a few words, what would your best advice be to somebody?
Focus as much as possible already in that data literacy program on business problems, to make it as tangible of what it means for the day after they come out, how this applies, and how this is not something that is on top, but it is integral to how they do their job and every job, and it's not for a separate department. No, absolutely. Bridget, your words of wisdom for the audience before we close off.
Think about the formats and think about the target customers. There's no one size fits all. There's no one format fits all, one target customer. So really make it relevant for the respective people and choose the format wisely in order to really make it stick with people.
That's good, thank you. And last but not least, Jack, for your suggestions to the audience.
I agree, everybody said. I'm going to add on top of that, build it bottoms up. Don't believe that a program that is defined for a manufacturing organization will work for sales and marketing, or don't believe that a program defined for the US will work in Germany. So build bottoms up based on the audience that you're addressing.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get buy-in then. Well, listen, thank you all very much for your contributions. It's a fascinating subject. If we had more time, and Musin wasn't waiting for me to pass the mantle back, we could, I'm sure, carry on for a lot longer. But thank you again for your